My wife, Emily, had always been calm, confident, and proud of her work. She had climbed the corporate ladder through grit, late nights, and a reputation for being the one person who could handle any crisis. I admired her for that. She invited me to her office's annual celebration dinner every year, and although corporate parties weren't exactly my thing, I always went, because she wanted me there. This year, however, something felt different the moment we entered the hall. The atmosphere was too loud, the drinks too strong, and the men at her workplace looked a little too relaxed around her. But I stayed quiet, kept a polite smile, and followed her lead. She introduced me to her colleagues one by one until we reached him, Darren. Slick hair, expensive cologne, and the kind of smile that screamed trouble. He looked her up and down in a way that made my jaw tighten, but she didn't seem to notice. He shook my hand with a half-hearted grip, barely hiding his annoyance that I existed. Half an hour later, I noticed him hovering around her again. At first, it was small, laughing too loudly, leaning too close, touching her elbow as if he had any right. Emily brushed it off politely each time, but I saw the discomfort in her eyes. The moment she looked away, he stared at her like she was something he planned to take. Then, when she was reaching across the counter to grab a drink, he did something I will never forget. He placed his hand on the small of her back, casual, intimate, completely uninvited. My blood went cold. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't insecurity. It was the pure violation of another man touching something sacred to me, my wife, while looking straight at me, as if daring me to say something. Emily froze. She stepped away instantly, her face tight with discomfort. Darren just smirked and said something I couldn't hear over the music, but I knew the type. I knew exactly what he thought he could get away with. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't punch him, or shout, or grab him by the collar. That would have made him the victim and me the aggressor. Instead, I simply walked over, placed my hand gently on Emily's shoulder, and said, "Come with me. Right now." We stepped into the hallway. Emily looked shaken. "I didn't like that," she whispered, her voice trembling with anger and embarrassment. "I know," I said quietly. "Don't worry. You won't ever see him again after tonight." She blinked at me, confused, but she didn't question it. She knew me well enough to recognize the calm in my voice, the kind that meant something was about to happen. I walked back into the event alone. I didn't look at Darren. I didn't need to. I headed straight for the bar where one of Emily's senior directors, Mr. Hale, was standing with a drink in his hand. I had met him before, an older man, sharp, respected, and very protective of his team. I greeted him politely, we exchanged a few words, and then I casually said, "Just out of curiosity, does your company have strict policies about workplace harassment at internal events?" His expression immediately sharpened. "Of course. Zero tolerance. Why do you ask?" Now I had his full attention. I leaned a little closer and spoke calmly. "Because a man named Darren just put his hands on my wife. And she didn't consent." The shift in Mr. Hale's face was instant, a mixture of anger, disbelief, and professionalism slamming into place. He excused himself without another word and marched straight toward the event coordinator. I didn't stay to watch. Instead, I walked toward one of the other senior employees, another director, a woman named Sandra. I told her the same thing, very calmly, very clearly. She gasped, asked if Emily was all right, and rushed off to find HR. Within 5 minutes, 3 executives and 2 HR representatives were circling the room, their eyes scanning for Darren. He noticed. He paled. He tried to slip toward the back exit, but he didn't make it 5 steps before 2 security guards stopped him. The music stopped abruptly. The chatter faded. People began whispering. I stood with my hands in my pockets, silent, watching him squirm as they escorted him to a separate side room. Emily came running toward me, eyes wide. "What did you do?" "Nothing," I said quietly. "I just told the truth to the right people." We left the party shortly after that. Emily was still shaken, but she held my hand tightly all the way home. She didn't say a word for a long time, just kept glancing at me with a look I couldn't quite read. The next morning, the fallout began. Darren was suspended immediately pending investigation. Several women came forward to file complaints. Apparently he had a reputation, but nobody had dared speak up before. HR found camera footage from the event showing exactly what he did to Emily. By noon, he was terminated. By the end of the week, he lost not just his job but his entire career. He had been applying for an internal leadership role, and the black mark on his record killed his chances. Companies in the same industry refused to touch him once the story circulated. He tried messaging Emily, the audacity of it, but she blocked him instantly. That evening, Emily wrapped her arms around me and whispered, "Thank you for protecting me without making me feel weak." I kissed her forehead. "You were never weak. He was just stupid." She looked up at me and smiled, a soft, grateful smile that made my chest warm. I didn't destroy Darren out of jealousy. I destroyed him because he crossed a line no man should ever cross, and he thought he was untouchable. But that night, he learned the truth. He touched my wife once. And that was enough for me to end everything he thought he had.